and then we have three viewer games. So we can get started now. The lesson today is basically how to study GM level games. This is a really interesting and difficult question. I guess I would say, there's not really one right answer to it, but it really kind of depends on what what your use is. There's two places where I think that looking at GM level games might be the most useful. I think that it might be useful in terms of learning. I think it might be useful in terms of learning and opening. And there's two pieces of that. So if you're learning and opening, that you are interested in, that you've already basically committed to what you're doing. If you say you want to learn the Grunfeld theory, what you can do is you can take a bunch of games, GM level games in the Grunfeld, and just kind of go over them. Basically go over the GM level games in the Grunfeld, take a look at what the opening lines are, and know that the opening lines that are played, in all likelihood, probably are relatively accurate. If you take, 50 GM level games from the Grunfeld and play them out to move 10, you'll get a pretty good sense of what, a solid idea, what a solid structure, solid starting structure, what a good move order is in the Grunfeld. That would be like helpful, in terms of learning and opening. Hey, welcome, Smiggy. Thank you very much for joining the stream. But yeah, so what I guess I would say there is, if you want to learn an opening that you've already established what opening it is, take many GM level games from that opening and just play them out. I think that's pretty helpful. On the other side, if you're interested in getting, yeah, sure, basic plans in the Sicilian. Yeah, totally. We can definitely do that, Smiggy. Yeah, thank you very much for the idea. Yeah, well, we should have a few minutes, and I think I can fit this into sort of what I was thinking of doing. So yeah, so basically, this would be an example. So, can you go over some of the basic plans in the Sicilian? And we're looking at that in the context of a GM level game. So what we can do here basically is we can say, all right, so Magnus Carlsen Sicilian. I picked Magnus Carlsen because I think that he's basically reflecting the highest level play that we've ever seen. So what we can do is basically Magnus Carlsen Sicilian, and then file type PGN, and then we should have we should basically have a PGN type file that will come to us. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with searching things on Google, but you can always specify file types. And file types, specification here, right? PGN is the file type for game collections. So if we take a look at Magnus Carlsen Sicilian file type PGN, we should get a set of games that that fit that criteria. So this is games from I think it's called Tata Steel, but it's a good set of games here. So what you can do is you can download it. I've noticed GitHub has a surprising number of games, but you can just look through this, or you can download the full PGN file. It's up to you. We can just search it. We can go to Carlsen and look at the games that he plays as black. Let's see. So this is him playing the King's Indian. This is Carlsen playing the Sicilian. So let's take a look at this one. So this is Tata Steel, Magnus Carlsen playing the Sicilian as black. And we have this full game here. So, basically what we've done here is we've gone, onto Google, we've had an opening idea, and we've had a player specifically that we were interested in, and now we've gotten a PGN style of his game. So this is a game that Magnus Carlsen plays in the Sicilian. Let's take a look at what, hey, good morning, Electric Horse, thanks for being here. So Smiggy asks, what are the basic plans in the Sicilian? Well, if we're looking at master level games, we can see what the highest level masters do in the Sicilian. This may or may not reflect kind of what's the most common at club level, but we know that what we're going to get is something that's a high level, Sicilian play. So yeah, e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. So if we're in a Sicilian, we can load it, or we can run the report, just to get the full opening book and all that stuff, get the eval. We are doing how to study GM level games, and then Smiggy came up with the suggestion of let's learn some plans in the Sicilian, and I think I can fit that in. So basically this is a GM level game. This is I guess they call this the last group variation of the Sicilian. But yeah, so this is how Carlsen plays the Sicilian, and this fits into the GM level games that we were talking about. So we have an idea of what we want to play. It's the Sicilian. We want to learn a basic plan. So let's see. We know that Carlsen plays about as well as any human does. So yeah, we know that these are sound lines, and these, the plans here are probably how to play them. This turns into something that's sort of similar to the Sveshnikov. With this Sveshnikov, the e5 is played relatively early. The knight gets forced to b4, and then play goes from there. a6 is, I think, playable, but d6 is the main line. Knight to d5, knight takes, pawn takes. Black has two choices: knight to b8, which is the most common, or knight to e7. Here, Carlsen opts for knight to e7. I've seen Carlsen play knight to b8 here as well, but knight to e7, c4, knight to g6. And yeah, so here we've got we've got this knight fairly well advanced. So what are the plans that this GM played in the Sicilian here? It's a good question. So his idea was to play Sveshnikov Sicilian, trade off early on d5, and then move his knight over to the queen side and begin play on the queen side as black. So c4, knight to g6, queen to a4, bishop to d7. We're still in opening theory, by the way. 20 GM level games have been played in this opening theory, so that should be helpful in terms of knowing what the main lines are. This is a relatively main line coming from knight to e7, and in this main line, black develops his bishops to solid lines where they're sort of oriented towards the king side, and I think potentially starts the attack on the king side. This is somewhat atypical for a Sicilian, but yeah. No, I mean, Carlsen does do some anti-fundamental things sometimes. One of the things that he does is, he also plays this knight b8 line of the Sicilian, or the Sveshnikov Sicilian. So here, knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, and then Carlsen sometimes goes knight to b8, in which case he's basically, not developed any of his pieces, while his opponent has developed and opened lines of attack. But he's so solid, and he has such a good understanding of kind of tactical possibilities and plan advancement that he's completely fine delaying the development for later. So this is anti-fundamental, but at the same time, that it's sound because Carlsen played it. In this game, he plays knight e7. The alternative is knight to b8. I'm sure Carlsen has big lines for both of those. Knight e7, knight to g6, and h4, h5. Basically, black expands on the king side here, or I guess the center. So it's sort of an interesting plan for black. As opposed to a plan where black works to have queenside expansion and a minority attack. In this particular Sicilian, the one that Carlsen plays, he ends up castling and then advancing in the center. This is unusual. This is a new plan. I don't know if this is the most representative plan of things that you can do in the Sicilian, but yes, most Sicilians attack on the queen side with pawns. I wanted to fit this into how a GM plays this game. So I just you saw the process that I went through. I randomly picked the Sicilian, but this is a new Sicilian plan. So in addition to the queenside minority attack plans, there's at least a few effective plans that come out of center control for black in this Sicilian. But this is not representative of the Sicilians. We'll play through it and then we'll find another one. But this is actually, we were thinking of what are black's plans in the Sicilian. This is a plan, but not a very, not the most common one. But Carlsen played it, so we know that it's fine. And this position, look at these evals. Black finally castled. These queens are in the center, or these pawns are in the center. Black is doing a very unusual plan with center control and no advancement on the queen side. This is a really strange plan for the Sicilian, but at the same time wins at a 2700 level, or 2800 level. So we know that that's fine. Yeah, no, these guys are monsters. Like, it's kind of crazy. So basically, this is not representative of a plan that's the most common in the Sicilian, but it is representative of a an idea that one can play in the Sicilian here. So, anyways, these pawns are in the center, and the king sort of, or basically the pieces sort of advance here. Anyways, yeah, hey, welcome, Sam Sejwani. How's it going? So yeah, we can take a look. Let's look at another one. If we're just looking at Carlsen, Carlsen playing the Sicilian. Um, so this was basically the process that we were going through. We found this big collection of games, and we were looking through games that Carlsen played, and we were looking for Sicilian theory. So here's another one for Carlsen in the Sicilian, and we can pull this out. But this is that. So let's take it from his perspective again. I hope this isn't the same game. Yeah, this one is slightly different, which is wild. So Carlsen is really trying a new idea. So look at this. This is really interesting. So this is Carjack and Carlsen, and basically it's the same Sveshnikov Sicilian. So clearly Carlsen had prepped his Sveshnikov before this tournament. But knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, knight to e7, bishop to c4, queen to a4. And basically this line, you know, this so this yeah, or Karyakin, whatever. But yes, probably. So yeah, so bishop to g5, queen to b8, bishop to e2, a6. And here again, Carlsen opts for this unusual plan. This might be more common in the Sveshnikov, the center and kingside play for black. But in terms of opening play for the Sicilian, this is unusual. You know, this is not the queenside attack for black that's the most common here. But look, this is a completely legitimate kingside attack that Carlsen has established out of the black side of the Sicilian. This might be Sveshnikov specific, but overall, this is pretty interesting. So yeah, looks like a win for black against another 2700. So these two games together, this is how we kind of analyze games, analyze possible plans. Smiggy wanted to see the particular, Sicilian plans, but yeah. Do I play the Sicilian at club level? I mean, I don't play the Sicilian, to be completely honest. The most common Sicilians at club level, so this is GM level stuff. These are atypical plans, so I agree. We should go back and look at what the most common plans for the Sicilian are at club level. But e4, c5, knight f3, and then black has a few different choices. The black's choices are d6, knight to c6, e6, g6, a6. A6, this one. So these are the options. A6, I think, is called the O'Kelly variation. Yeah, but I would still consider that to be, you know, in the line. So yeah, so knight f3, and then opportunities include d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and then black's again at a place where he has a few different choices. Knight to f6 is the most common. So I would say this is much more representative of a common, a common queenside or a common club level Sicilian. Options for white here, c4 is possible, or sorry, here you need to defend the pawn. So f3 followed by c4 can potentially work, but we're at a club level, and this is all this is all standard. Knight to c3, a6. Black again has options that define which Sicilian it is. A6, knight to c6, g6, e6. All of these are good for black. All of these are ideas. A6, bishop to g5, e6, f4, And white, yeah. But yeah, no. But you've asked a question that I haven't answered completely, which is basically what are ideas for white in the Sicilian. So basically, or what's a representative game for in the Sicilian for? So you like time and oven dragon? Okay, cool. So yeah, let's do a dragon then. Let's do like the hyper accelerated dragon. This should be interesting. Knight f3, g6. This is the hyper accelerated dragon. And then d4, c takes, knight c6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, bishop to e3. This is hyper accelerated dragon, or I guess it transposes into an accelerated dragon. I don't think so. We can take a look, but sure. Let's see. Good question. So let's go back to the kind of main overarching idea here, and let's say GM level file type PGN, a GM level dragon file type PGN. So I'm hoping that this will end up with a so again we've got an interesting situation here. But yeah, we've got basically another. This was the idea for searching it, GM level dragon. But yeah, let's look. So we've got now on GitHub another big PGN file. Let's search for dragon in this text file, and I think we should end up in a situation where we'll get it. So e4 c5, and this is a fairly early dragon. This is a So this is a 1936 game. I don't really. You may be reflecting a real thing, so an early like dragon. But yeah, let's look at this. This is a this is a dragon where there's an early g6. This is Evans versus Reshevsky, so a little bit dated, but we were interested in looking at GM level games and GM level games that play the dragon. The dragon has happened at least a few times at GM level. That's what this reflects. So this is Reshevsky playing the dragon as black. Not saying that this isn't busted, just basically saying that this is not that good for, or just basically saying that it is playable generally at GM level. G3, bishop to G2, queen takes, bishop to G7, and here, yeah, that's true too. That's definitely worth noting, Electric Horse. Like, just because something isn't played at GM level. But yeah, this is so yeah, we could look at this too. Let's look at Sirowan's dragon games. Maybe that's a better way of approaching this. But what we can do is we can go to Sirowan dragon file type PGN, and this will give us this should give us that. So this I think this will be that. So yeah, so let's see here. These are GM level games. They are all in terms of looking at who these are from. These ones don't appear to be clearly labeled, but we know that they're super GM games just by the labeling of this. So this is another one, opensource.apple.com. Okay. Interesting. This one too. Maybe these ones are more clearly labeled. But yeah, let's see Sirowan's games here. So anyways, I guess I was sort of interested in looking at how one can go over this, can go over these games, or how one can draw from these games. So these are, I was looking for Sirowan dragons, but I was thinking GM dragon, and then we can kind of come up with a, so again, like these ones, this is a 2500 playing the dragon against a 2700. So let's look at this. But GitHub has a bunch of GM level games. In this case, it's a 2521. In this case, it's a 2640 versus 2678. At club level, I don't know how relevant it is to go for a 2800 level game as opposed to a 2600 level game. But the important thing is we've come up with a method to find GM level games. and we can find GM level dragons out of this. So here's the dragon played by a 2650, and yeah, yeah, no, I mean they're all good games, but this was a GM level game played in the Dragon in 2013 in Norway, and we found a system that was effective in terms of finding a GM level game that comes out of the Dragon. So this is something that we can look at. This is something that we can draw from. A recent 2650 playing a Dragon game. That may not be representative of something being common, but it is representative of something being, existent. So yeah, so this is the Sicilian Dragon as played by a 2650. We'll figure out what the plans are here. Castles, d6, castles, bishop to e6. Pressure getting formed on bishop to e3. Let's look at the opening evals. Yeah, I mean, basically, that's a plan for white. Yeah, I mean, I think that the typical plans against the dragon are these aggressive attacks on the king side. I think that's going to pretty consistently be true. In this one, it looks like they're shaping up for h3, g4, and f5. But yeah, you're right. Trading off that queen bishop battery can work, and basically getting that early attack on the king side for white. It tends to be a common plan for white. On the black side, a6, b5, and queenside expansion. That tends to be pretty solid. But rook to c8, king to h1, a6, queen e1, b5, and yeah, we've exited mainline strategy. Queen to a1 is not the most common. Bishop to f3 and a4 are more common for white. But queen to e1 can be effective as a method of bringing the queen to the queen side or to the king side here and maintaining the attack. Let's look at what happened in this game, though. This is 2650 versus 2650 out of the dragon, and let's figure out exactly what happened. What are the plans? White's playing more in the center than I would have thought. I would figure in this situation, White's going to go with his standard anti-dragon plan with like G4, Queen H4, G4, F5, Bishop to H6. I would figure that might be an effective plan for White here. But yeah, it's up to Black. Black's actually showing a positive eval here. B4 looks solid for Black. On B4, knight A4, knight takes E4. That's what the engine line is. But Black's equalized, at least according to the chess.com engine. This looks like a solid position. The rook's on a good file, and basically this queenside attack for Black should be a pretty solid thing to do. Knight to D7. F5. So this is White's plan. White's pushing on F5, trying to open up the king side. I mean, if I was Black here, I would probably play bishop takes B3, and then I would probably play, I guess I would play queen to B6. Suggest bishop as an alternative to rook to D1. Yeah, that's an idea. I guess the point of bishop to G1 is to be able to support an E5 push. But that's a little bit unusual. I don't know. Let me just read that. I would say generally no. I think that trading off your bishop on e3 for that knight on g3 is rarely good. I think that you want that bishop. You want that bishop to be a resource for Black, either played to g5 or h6. H6, in the context of a larger attack usually, but basically the h6 battery, the bishop to g5 battery, those tend to be the best options for that bishop. So I would avoid trading. I would avoid letting letting Black trade off the knight on g4 for the bishop on e3. I think overall that trade tends to be bad. There are situations in which you can use it to open up the rook file, the rook on f1 facing the rook on f8. But I would say be a little bit. I mean, if you don't have to make that trade, don't make that trade. The bishop, the dark squared bishop, is a valuable piece in terms of attacking on the king side, which is something that you generally want to do in the Sicilian. If you trade it off early, you'll have more limited attacking chances. Anyways, knight to d7, f5, bishop takes, pawn takes, and it's point 0.6, and black is looking fine. I think ideas here. So here, I guess I would say, black has this strong rook on the c file. Yeah, exactly. I think that, and I think that that's a defensive play that makes sense, Sam Sejuani. If knight to g4 is going to be played on the next move, there's many times when f3 can become a valuable resource. But yeah, I think that's about right, Sam Sejuani. You can always play f3. F3 also supports e4. And usually by this point in the game, your knight that would be have a potential posted on f3 is elsewhere on the board, so it doesn't really weaken you too much. There's also lines where f3 is paired with queen to e1. I think this game was not one of them because this was the full Grand Prix with the pawn to f4. But the pawn to f3 move can be valuable in terms of supporting e4. Knight to c6, bishop takes, king takes, a4. Yeah, exactly. No, f3 is a move that fits into the Sicilian for many purposes. It can prevent that early knight to g4, and yeah, like you're saying, it can also support g4 and advancement on the king side. White's plans in the Sicilian tend to be aggressive attacks on the king side. This is what we're sort of seeing in this 2650 versus 2650 game. Carlsen's games were crazy. They had a plan that involved kingside advancement for black. But yeah, this game in general has been much more representative of Sicilian themes. So I guess what I would say in terms of advancements in the Sicilian, what you can do here is you can come up with ideas of, a book to read that's helpful, Smiggy, since circling back to your original question, is Ideas Behind the Chess Openings by Fine. I think that's really a good book for learning kind of the basic themes in these positions. But yeah, overall here, I think that this is good. Bishop takes, c takes, knight to e5, knight to d4, and basically here, black is doing fine. Ideas, rook to h8 could be helpful, queen to b6 could be helpful, a4, knight to e5, and yeah, this ends up being pretty good for black. I don't know, ideas like queen to b6 maybe. But in this situation, you've got the rook on this long diagonal or long file. You can play queen to b6. The minority attack has neutralized, but I still think black's play is generally going to be on the queen side, and white's play is generally going to be on the king side. Queen to b6, queen to e2, rook to b8, and black is looking fine. In terms of improvements, rook fc8 could be good. You do need to monitor f7 a little bit. But black should be all right. This is a relatively equal game, but I think that, this overall has sort of reflected, wow, big blunder here. So this is 2750s versus 2750s. Look what happened here. This is pretty unusual for a 2650 level game. Here, there's a big tactical error. E3 does not work for black. Or, sorry, E3 here. Interesting. So yeah, the engine's having some trouble with this one. Anyways, black gets this great attack in the center. This D pawn gets away from white here. This is really interesting. D3 is not even seen, I don't think, by the engine. Or if we play it, then it gets looked at by the engine later. But yeah, D3 ends up being a great opportunity for black. Yeah, potentially. That's definitely possible. We could turn the engine up. I guess I would say I'm not super I'm not super interested in looking at this game in depth. But yes, that would be the appropriate next step with a more serious analysis. This analysis, we're just sort of coming up with plans. This game is representative of the most normal games in the Sicilian Dragon. Uh, Black attacks on the queen side, white attacks on the king side. White attacks first, and black attacks with the assistance of this open C file. So yeah, this ends up being pretty good, and this looks good for black. Yeah, so this is a good win for black out of the Sicilian Dragon. Let's take another one. I think there are other Dragon games played at 2700 level. Just so we know, this is another one. This is Hansen playing Ponomarev, I guess. This is another Dragon game. Hansen, the 2500, plays black and tries this and loses. Let's see what a less successful Sicilian Dragon looks like. This is slightly lower level, 2500 versus 2650. But no, this is not Eric Hansen. This is Torgborn, different Hansen. So yeah, this is black playing this game. And d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. Black is looking fine. But yeah, g6, bishop to e3, bishop to g7. This is a very common dragon. And it will involve, I haven't looked at this game yet. You saw me pull it directly from GitHub. But this dragon's going to involve a6, b5 for black and an attack on the king side for white. Probably even that bishop h6 tactic that Sam Sejuani was talking about. But f3 is played. Yeah, the queen goes to the dark squares. And this bishop is valuable resource for white. So yeah, this again neutralized a little bit more quickly than your average Sicilian. These players are so tactically strong that they don't really allow much counterplay for their opponents. I'm sort of impressed by this move. Bishop to e6, just sacking the exchange. That's pretty wild. Bishop to e6, and then I guess the play is on bishop takes f8. What happens? Bishop takes f8. Queen takes f8, and both this and then this pin is getting threatened on the next move, as well as queen to b5, rook to b8. That's pretty crazy. Interesting. So yeah, so this is a Sicilian played with black, black playing d6. But this is, again, Sicilian Dragon played at the top level. Not saying that this is common, but this Sicilian Dragon happened 3 times in this World Championship with grand. Basically, these were all grandmasters, except for this one. This guy was a 2500 IM. These GMs, yeah, no, I mean, I guess, the thing is they really do feel confident in sacking the exchanges. Bishop to g7, f3, castles, queen to d2, and black is good. Knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, and yeah, in this case, it looks like black has a pretty good position. Honestly, I would like black's position here. I think you have great opportunities to attack. The engine disagrees. This is pretty interesting. The engine is disagreeing with my assessment, but if I were to choose between... So let's just take everything off here, right? We're still in opening theory. Opening theory, there's still about 1,000 games left here, 1,100 games. But what's interesting about this is these possibilities. This ends up being pretty strong for... this ends up being pretty strong for white, even though I would think that black is better here. I would just figure this pressure that this bishop is putting onto the open file, rook to b8 being available, bishop to e6 being available, knight to b4. I would just figure that the combination of all these would be good for black, but no, it looks like white's a little better. Yeah, I guess there's no sound tactical possibilities. I would figure that there's practical compensation for black, and maybe that's just getting eliminated by the engine. I guess I could see that, Electric Horse. You're making a good point on that. But yeah, e5, bishop to c5, or bishop to c5. The exchange gets sacked. But yeah, no, you're making a good point, Electric Horse, for sure. But that practical compensation probably isn't factored. We're still in common opening theory too, though. So this is GMs playing the dragon, and this is not an uncommon line. bishop to b3, a5, a4, knight to f4. But yeah, surprisingly inaccurate actually. Uh, I guess this game is long enough that they probably make up their inaccuracy scores at the end. But let's look at this. This is two inaccuracies in a row. Bishop to d6 not liked by the engine, and queen to b6 not liked by the engine. Engine liked queen to b7. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, a little better. In a dragon fashion, basically this bishop has maintained its strength on this diagonal the entire game. And white ends up advancing that pawn and winning. Okay, cool. This is interesting. Interesting game. No, I haven't seen that, Sam Sijwani, but I would be interested. That does sound like an interesting thing. Let's take one more. This is one more 2550 playing to the GM, or playing the dragon is black. Then we can move on. But basically, I hope this was helpful. In terms of finding games, this file type PGN trick, these lead to GM level games. So this is GM dragon file type.pgn. This will return you a PGN file on Google. Many are on GitHub. Some are on Pro Chess League. They should all be, basically all of these are games that were played in major tournaments and people have compiled them. But yeah, if you're ever interested, you can look things up in this way. So you can say like Fisher Spassky file type PGN, and you will find the Fisher Spassky file type.pgn, and you'll be able to import that PGN file from Google. You will have found this. You will have basically found this game on Google, and you can use that game and have a relatively focused study of the GM games that you're looking at. File type PGN. You can also use this kind of thing for like file type MP4. You can end up finding other things, or file type AVI. But PGN is probably the most promising. If you ever need to find files on Google, you can use this resource to find things a little bit more quickly. PGNs are good and easy to find, and you can find them frequently. There's some on GitHub. There's some other places as well. But yeah, these will let you do focused searches and find GM games quickly. So yeah, going back to that game we were looking at, this was another 2500 GM level game. But yeah, this, in terms of thinking about how to quickly find GM level games, quickly find GM level games that you're focused on, that trick in Google can be helpful. And then you can use the GM games to draw, both a good assessment of what is objectively good opening play, and also objectively good so objectively good opening play, as well as potential middle game ideas. As you've seen, middle game ideas kind of are variable. Those middle game ideas that Carlsen was doing in the Sicilian were crazy. Basically, like those aggressive pushes in the center by black, that was pretty interesting. I thought that was a pretty cool, idea, to be honest. But not something that's the most common at club level. So GMs, you know that opening, or that idea is sound, but it may not be the one that's the most consistent, or the one that has the most additional support by available material. Again, super high level play by Carlsen, and I'm sure that plan is fine, but it doesn't necessarily reflect what's the most common. But it is playable. Interesting stuff. So yeah, here's one more GM level game. Again, it doesn't look like they're playing the hyper accelerated dragon. It looks like they're playing the regular dragon with G6 in the Sicilian. But yeah, this is another GM versus GM level game played in this tournament with an early Sicilian. White plays an early F3. We're in very well established theory here, about 14,000 games. Knight to C6, bishop to C4. This bishop to c4 is kind of questionable to me. I'm sure, again, it's fine. It's being played by a 2720. But bishop to c4 is thematically not usually the best in this Sicilian. It can run into e6 too easily. That said, I'm sure that the GM is completely fine and aware of that, so I won't get too deeply into that. All right, so here, white is doing kind of the thematic thing. White's going to start attacking on the king side. Black's going to start attacking on the queen side. Let's see how this goes in this game. h4, rook to c8, bishop to b3, h5, castles queen side, knight to e5, bishop to g5. More common than bishop to g5 was bishop to h6 here. I think this bishop to h6 what was played in this game. But this is the first dragon game where we've seen the players being willing to trade off on h6. h6 is also a tactic that I usually think of as being stronger if associated with associated with a rook support. This position does not have the support of the rook on the rook file, but I guess the bishop h6 is still playable because bishop takes g7 is fine for white, and on bishop takes h6, queen takes h6. And black's not going to be able to maneuver any of his pieces to attack the queen. Knight to g4 is never going to be playable, and there's no other pieces that can get to the queen on h6. So, anyways, knight takes, rook takes, bishop takes, king takes, and black is fine. Rook he1, rook fe8, a6, and again, black is fine. Let's just look at the eval, but I think black has gotten a pretty effective queenside attack here. This kingside attack for white didn't really work, but let's go back to the beginning and just look at the themes. The themes here are this attack on the king side for white. Black proactively plays h5. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this, but these are GMs, and they really they have a really good accuracy to it. If they know exactly. I guess I would say my reasoning on these types of moves is kind of simplistic. H5 being you have to basically be confident in your understanding of the tactical, like the specifics in the tactical position to play h5. Otherwise, it's just weakening your king side and creating a hook. But at the GM level, the GMs know that this hook can't really be exploited. They've calculated it through. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Drumstuck. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining the stream. H5, castles, knight to e5, bishop to h6, knight to c4. And yeah, this is all good. Black is basically, white's attack never really materialized, and black is basically pushing hard on the queen side. A6, and black is fine. Bishop h6 is still a book move. Good question about good point. Let's look at bishop h6 in the context of how frequently that's played. Knight to e5, bishop to h6. I mean, these guys play book theory well into really far into these games. Knight to c4 is also book theory. It's not until many moves later that we really get out of the book. Let's see. The first really non-book move that's played here, there's two in a row. So there's queen to a5 by black. That's a book second choice. And then there's rook he1, which is another book second choice. This gets us pretty far out of the book, but even here, there's still GM level games. They really know their theory. But black is starting his queenside attack. So thematically, this makes sense. White attacked on the king side. It didn't really materialize. Now black's making his best chances on the queen side. I don't know if he'll end up winning from this, but it's looking fairly good for black at this point. Yeah, so I think that the black or white resigned here. I think that knight takes knight takes g2. I think wins, if I'm calculating correctly. Knight takes g2, h3, and black is winning. Pretty sure. But yeah, I think black's just won. Black's up by about 7.5 pawns here. And this shows sort of the effectiveness of this. The interesting thing is that the h5 was the one that went on to queen, but the queenside attack by black was really helpful in terms of materializing an attack that traded off at exactly the right period in time, brought the white pieces to the queen side so that there could be an effective push on the king side. Great play, really high level stuff, and the more thematically consistent with what happens in the Sicilian. Black attacks on the queen side, white attacks on the king side. White didn't quite get the threat that he needed on the king side, so the game became about black attacking on the queen side, and everything traded off, and black won by drawing all of his pieces, all of white's pieces away, and queening with the rook on, or the pawn on the rook file. Really interesting stuff. But most importantly about this lesson, I wanted to show everyone how to search for search for GM level games effectively. This strategy I think is pretty good. You can find search like Tata Steel or whatever. You can look and find like Tata Steel Masters 2021. You can find full PGN files on GitHub primarily. They're up there. They're available. Good collections. But file type PGN, that's the key. That's the key term for you in terms of learning how to search on Google efficiently. This will be helpful. So if you're ever interested in getting collections of GM games, you're ever interested in drawing GM level knowledge from the internet. This is a helpful way to do it. This will get you good game collections. I'm also curious. Let's see, like file type CBH. I would figure that a CBH would also have some, or CBV. These are so this is a CBV file. These are some less. I don't know. These websites might be less reputable. I would be more reluctant to kind of go through them. But yeah, you can use this file type trick on Google and receive game collections that could be helpful for you. Anyways, I thought this was interesting. I thought this might streamline your study. You can pull GM games from there with analysis, some without analysis. But if you're ever interested in improving your games based on study of GM level stuff, that search tool can be effective. Anyways, interesting stuff. We saw Carlsen play an unusual Sicilian. We saw GMs play some Sicilian dragons that were at a very high level, but also thematically consistent with what you would expect at club level. Very interesting stuff. Interesting idea. Thank you for suggesting that lesson. Let's take a look. These are 3 games from that were sent in. First is Determined Vision's game. Let's take a look at Determined Vision's game. Determined Vision is playing black here. And let's look. Determined Vision plays the French, d5, c5. This is an early c5, knight to f3, knight to c6. And basically on this, I think that black does well by maintaining pressure in the center. I would wonder about c takes d4 here. One of the themes in the French is that so basically this is an early knight to f3. Overwhelmingly against c5, it looks like about a 90% possibility that white plays c3 here. We have the general French theme, which is that white wants to maintain this pawn structure on d4 and e5. And against this early c5, c3 ends up being a solid move. c3, knight to c6, knight to f3, queen to b6. White's looking fine. Black's looking fine. No real issues. But I think that c takes d4 could be promising. Let's look at the analysis here. I like c takes d4, to be honest. I think c takes d4 is best. Yeah, c takes d4 is best here. If black can manage to mangle that d4 e5 structure in the French, it's very rare that it wouldn't be the best move for him to do that. So here, when c takes d4 has created an opportunity for black to permanently disrupt the pawns on d4 and e5, it makes sense for black to take that. Even though it's not the most common, it's the second most common here. For thematic reasons, c takes d4 is better than knight to c6. C takes d4, bishop to d3, knight to c6, and black I think is looking solid. Yeah, I like this. c3, queen to so basically c takes d4 was better than knight to c6 here. I think that's objectively true, and it follows the theme d4 e5, disrupt that structure. Knight to c6 gives white the opportunity to play c3, which he does. Now white has worked and effectively gotten his d4 e5 cemented there. So he takes, and black is looking fine. Here's a tactic for black. Looks like a good idea. This will mess up white's pawn structure, but yeah, castles is a big tactical mistake. Allowing knight takes e5 is a big tactical mistake. Black is in good shape here. So yeah, so black wins. Black aggressively simplifies. In terms of improving this game for black, I thought this was pretty solid. The biggest thing that I'm seeing in this game, c takes d4. A big French theme is maintaining d4 and e5. Ideas Behind the Chess Openings by Fine does a really good analysis of this. Gives various French pawn structures, but basically, if white can maintain this pawn structure throughout the game, he's going to have a lasting spatial advantage. If black can disrupt this pawn structure, he equalizes or goes ahead. So if you have an opportunity to disrupt d4 with c5 and not have d4 be replaced by another pawn, definitely take it as black. It's strongest in this position, and it's very rare that it wouldn't be the strongest play for black. Just remove the pawn on d4, and you'll be okay. Knight c6, c3. Knight takes d5 was a tactic that white shouldn't have allowed here. But this all looks pretty good. Now white's just up a pawn with better positioning. Honestly, I wouldn't want to make corrections to this part of the game. The game's pretty much decided. You just need an effective defense. Overall, I thought this was pretty accurate. Yeah, it's a 97% accuracy game, solid. But the improvement that I see, just immediately is c takes d4 is objectively better than knight to c6. Disrupt the pawns in the center, disrupt white's French structure, and among other things, it creates a ton of weaknesses. Pawn takes d4. For this pawn on e5. It's going to be really annoying for white to have to support this, either f4 or queen e2, but resources are going to have to be expended in defending the e4 pawn, or the e5 pawn now, and black can kind of exploit that inefficiency. Pawn takes, bishop to b4, bishop takes. Yeah, honestly, I think black played the rest of this fine. I don't want to nitpick on anything here. This is overall a very accurately played game, good plays, and yeah, black deserves for sure to win this. Very efficient clipping of all the pawns in the endgame too. I don't have that much to add on this determined vision. I think you played a solid game. But thematically, c takes d4, objectively better than knight to c6. Maybe you have preferences for knight to c6, I don't know, but pawn takes d4, knight takes c4, and white will have a mangled French pawn structure for the rest of the game. Yeah, no, this is really better played for. This was really better played for black. So, yeah, I don't have that much to add. Overall, super solid game, nicely done. I would play c takes d4 over knight to c6. The engine agrees. I think most engines would agree with this. Mangle white's French pawn structure. It will be very difficult for him to recover that. Anyways, interesting. And on to the next one. Thanks for the game, Determined Vision. Always happy to look at a very accurate game. Don't have much to add there. The most instructive thing is I think that knight takes d4 is an improvement on the theory there. Okay, TK's next game. Awesome. Let's go. TK is playing white in this game. So, all right. So, knight to e2. That's an interesting one. I don't know. No, I mean, you have good games too, TKT, but this, no, I think this, I don't think there's anything wrong with this. I mean, knight to e2, I think is, knight to e2, I think is kind of, not the strongest, to be honest. In terms of looking at games that are common here, there's 300,000 games of which less than 100 are knight to e2. Not saying that that's the biggest determinant, but knight to e2 seems to fail on that criteria test that we were looking at. So that criteria test minus zero point 0.4 versus 0.7 looks like a difference of about a pawn. So I don't know. If you have a reason to play it, or you have a special prepared theory in mind, then by all means. But knight to f3, I think, is overall stronger. Yeah, so I think knight f3 is better. Hey, welcome, Matt Yop. Thanks for joining the stream. So knight to f3 I think is better than knight to e2 here. I think that's objectively true. But knight e2 is played. Okay, sure. This is just in terms of openings. This is called the Alapin opening. I didn't know that was what that was called, but that is interesting. Alapin. Okay, cool. Alapin, knight to c6, g3. I do not know the themes here at all, so this is pretty interesting. We're transposing into more common theory as opposed to less common theory. That's cool. d6, castles, a5. I mean, it's a book move. It's not a very common book move, but yeah, this is interesting. a5. Overall here, this eval shifts about, but yeah, that's right. Drum is correct about that. Castles, h5, and then I think h4 is not the best. I think the engine's pushing for h3. I don't know. I probably wouldn't do either of those, to be honest. This pressure is getting a little what was the most? What was the last game that you sent in, Matt Yop? Good question. Let's look. Just looking for what the most recent game sent by Matt Yop was. There was one on May 22nd during the 9:35 p.m. stream, and there was one on May 23rd during the 8 a.m. stream. There you go. May 22nd at 9:35 and May 23rd at 8 a.m. D3 is logical. That's what I'm thinking. Drumstick. This h4 is a bit quiet. C3 d4 structure, that could be good. I don't see anything wrong with c3 d4. But anyways, here g5 c3. C3 is now no longer playable. So this is sort of the worst case scenario, right? If white just keeps his pawns here, I don't think any attack can be cemented, but h4 creates this huge hook. Then, once this hook is there, white basically goes for this c3 d4 structure, and he gets mangled on the king side. So this was trouble for white, to be honest. Okay. Interesting. Then there's a big tactical misstep. Bishop takes f3. Which loses the piece. Well, this is wild. I don't think d4 is really an option with the fianchetto style. Let's look. I'm honestly and good win, TK. Always keep your tactics strength up. Good tactical opportunities, good win in a difficult situation. You held the king side attack together with tactically resourceful defense, and then you won on the queen side. I don't think you got lucky. I think you just had, you had a better tactical, you had better tactical sight in a position where tactical sight became the most, became the most important characteristic. So that's what I would say there. You played well tactically, so that, it's not, I mean, it's not luck. It's just having good tactical strength in a place where you really needed it. But yeah, let's look at what you're talking about. I'm not a big fan of h4. I think this creates that hook. That seems annoying for... that seems like something that could cause problems for white. Better here, maybe c3, d4 could be good. But h4, this h4, g5, this overall seems sketchy for white. I don't think this is the best idea. d4 then becomes the best move, I think. Yeah, d4 at least fixes this this bishop pin, but I overall I'm just really not sold on h4 as a move. I think c3 d4 here makes more sense. In terms of opening theory, c3 is one of the games played here. c6, c3, b4, bishop b6, b5. Okay, d4. I like this plan. This is the plan that was in the book. Again, black looks like he's getting a fairly solid position, but honestly, I'm sort of like, I don't know. At least here, you don't have, black doesn't have an extremely direct attack on the king side. This might just end up being weaker, in the sense that these pawns will get traded off and white may lose one. Or pawn takes d4, bishop b2, pawn takes c3, bishop takes c3, and white loses a pawn. But at least there's not aggressive attacking on the king side there. Overall, Alapin, not sold on this opening. I think you might benefit from playing knight to f3. Potentially. Yeah, potentially Drumstuck, but what I'm saying is that, so you're saying the problem with knight c3, the problem with c3 is it blocks the queenside knight. Yeah, there's definitely truth to that. Overall, though, I'm sort of not sold on the, so the first thing in terms of making changes to this game, what's going on in this game? I think the first thing is that that the Sicilian Alapin, or that the Alapin opening, this 2 knight e2, this can't be correct for white. I don't think that this, I mean, if you're comfortable with it, then okay, sure, but there's many better openings for white. Knight to c3, knight to f3, bishop to c4 are all openings that don't create problems. Knight to e2 blocks off this bishop. It puts the knight on a natural square where it's not making any threats. Like the knight's going to end up developing to g3 or maybe possibly d4. d4 is probably the best case scenario for development for the white knight now, but I don't see knight e2 having any real definable advantages over knight to f3. So let's stop. Let's stop on that first. Unless you really have a good reason for liking knight to e2, knight to f3 provides all of the benefits of knight to e2 with fewer of the disadvantages. Yeah, h3 is also playable there. I guess what I'm saying is that I'm very reluctant to play any rook, basically pawn moves on this castled king. I feel like any pawn moves by this king are going to make things weaker. h3 is given by the engine, by the way. The h3 line, we can see what happened in the h3 book line, h3, g4, knight f6. This ends up being solid for white. Pawn takes, h takes, bishop takes. Actually, that's a way better eval for black than I would have expected. So g4, knight f6. Knight c3. So here they're proposing c3 over knight c3, but I don't know. I just don't like any of these. Yeah, right? Well, I'm just confused by this. So let's look at this h3 line again. h3, h4, g4, knight to f6, knight to c3. And knight to c3 is... the engine's doing all sorts of weird stuff in this. Um, they're calling knight to c3 best, but at the same time they're not giving it. The line evals are not as good against. The line evals are not as good as this. So now knight takes g4, h takes g4, bishop takes g4. Engine's really struggling on this game. So king to h2 maybe. But yeah, overall, I'm not knight to e2. I'm kind of just. Yeah. Anyways, this is a crazy game. Knight to e2. Yeah, no. Well, I mean, okay. So let's go through. Let's go through TK. Honestly, knight to e2. I'm not a huge fan of in general. I think knight f3 is just better than knight to e2. Maybe you have good reasoning, but okay. And bishop takes, knight to e2, and white's just worse. So I wouldn't have created this. I wouldn't have created this. Well, it's interesting. Yeah. All right, we can spend more time on positional play. This is really the key position in my mind. Like if I'm looking at this situation, then I say, what's the advantage here, or how can white best advance this? H3 is what's getting suggested by the engine. H3 is also in the book, but I think, yeah, I would play like D3, bishop E3 here. I don't see what's so good about this. H3, so H4, bishop to E3. Why does the engine like black so much in this case? I guess this gets out of control. The queen moves to the rook file. Yeah, really interesting situation. So yeah, but this is all right. So this is the position that I want to give the most attention to. I think we can be in agreement, right? Alapin is not a good opening for white, and this game becomes tactical, and don't want to spend much time on it. Yeah. So this right here, I think is the key position in terms of analysis. We don't have a lot of engine, or we don't have a lot of book theory to look at, so that's big, and I think that maybe, I mean, h3 is getting proposed by white, so that h3 g4 idea. What about b4? Interesting. I think just knight takes and black ends up with the same, the same threat on g1. I don't know. Oh, right, yeah, because of the knight, yeah, knight d3. I don't know. This is the position that so I think in terms of analyzing this game, where can I offer you the most value on this TK? I think the first one is knight to e2, but I don't think there's anything surprising about that. And basically this h4 was this ended up being eval just fine actually, or whereas one of white's best options. But I'm so reluctant to play these pawn moves on the king side. The kingside ideas are basically getting so, the kingside's, like basically, I just figure that any pawn moves on the king side are going to worsen the king's king safety, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Yeah, h4 ended up getting evaluated as one of the best moves, so maybe I should just be less reluctant on that. h3, H4, sure. G4. But yeah, I feel like white's just sort of fine. This attack. This is black has a ton of practical compensation here. Um, cool. Thanks, Matt. Yup. Yeah, I have a few to confirm on there. A lot came in last night, so I will confirm that for you shortly, Matt. Yup. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, this Alapin opening I think is not correct for white. But okay, H4, I guess, sure. H4, G5, and then D4. So, all right. So H4 seemed to be a reasonable enough response to this. I don't fundamentally I get nervous to play these pawn moves out against a castled king. You can't undo them, and they're gonna there's a chance that it worsens your king safety. But H4 ended up being playable. H4, G5, and then the move here is D4. This is engine assisted. I'm sure I wouldn't have found it, but D4 basically makes this threat on this bishop and this threat on this pawn. So on G5, play D4 and threaten this bishop on C5. So that was the main theme here. Knight takes, bishop takes, and now actually white's pretty good on defense. So this is actually really instructive if you think about it. That is actually a really good idea. So basically here, um, H4, which I was reluctant to play because it lessens the amount of pawns as a barrier on this king. H4, G5, and then on G5, play the immediate D4 and have threats on this pawn on G5, which neutralize that kingside attack at the same time that you're making a piece threat that black needs to respond to in the center. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought about this in terms of basically how to order an attack, but yeah, this is actually really effective. D4 and yeah, it looks good. What if G5 D4 bishop takes G4? Good question. Well, I think you can play knight takes freely, right? Because knight takes and you're still up a piece. So in this case, if G takes H4, you're fine. You've won a piece in this exchange. Um, uh, yeah. So yeah, this H4 D4, just this knight can still take with tempo. Basically here you with D4 bishop takes D4 knight takes because the question was basically okay, so now bishop takes G5 isn't takeable here, right? So white's just gonna be worse after bishop takes B2. Uh, Bishop takes G5 F6 and then bishop to C1. But overall, I think that I think knight takes is better. You might as well. You're still up a piece in this scenario, so you can play knight takes, and on pawn takes G4, you can play knight takes C6, and you've solidified up a piece, which should be good for white. But yeah, so that's really cool. I wouldn't have thought tactically about this theme. Basically having this making this double threat and basically holding the defensive resource until that advancing play is played by black. Um, yeah, isn't bishop taking the bishop with a knight better? Yes. So you might as well take off black's good squared bishop with your knight on e2, and then bishop takes g5. Good question, Matt Yap. I will confirm back at the end of the stream. I don't want to give a yeah, that is a really good tactic idea. So yeah, better idea. I good question, Mayup. I don't know yet, but I will take a look. The reason I don't know is I have a few others that came in last night and I haven't confirmed those yet. But after that, I'll get back to you. within a little bit after the stream. But yeah, good question, Matt. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, might as well take off that black squared bishop, and you're good that you're good with that. So yeah, knight takes d4, pawn takes g4, and white is up here. Looks solid, good play for white. Interesting. Okay, so continuing on this, that was the tactical improvement. I was worried about creating all these hooks and danger with h4, but on g5, d4, and bishop to g5, basically this double threat creates a great resource for you. You can just wait until g5 happens and then play bishop takes g5 if needed. So yeah, good idea. I like it. Well, I just wouldn't think about this. I just wouldn't think about this idea, or I wouldn't play a move with the idea of, you know, just the thought process on h4 g5 is a little bit different than how I would think about this. It's really good. I mean, it makes me basically reconsider how to play g5 exactly. With g5, you're yeah. I wouldn't think of this either. I would just say h4. Okay, this is weakening the integrity of the kingside pawn structure. But h4 defending g5, to actually go through and think, okay, well, what if g5 actually is played here? Okay, well, if g5 is actually played here, then I have d4 as a resource, and this d4 double check here. This is going to end up being this is going to end up being stronger for white because it's a double attack, and this double attack, basically this side of the double attack wins a piece. This side of a double attack, neutralizes all further attacking for black on the king side. So, anyways, just the thought process behind this is what's a little bit interesting to me. It's just different, and it's less superficial. My thinking would be superficial. I would say, okay, well, h4, and then black's gonna have hooks, but actually going through black's tactical response and thinking like, okay, well, if h4 is played, g4 is then played, and then I have a tactical response to that. That takes things a little bit. That basically makes the thinking a little bit less superficial. Like, you're thinking of what is black's actual best tactic to try to exploit this, and in this case, what is the thing to think about here. But yeah, this is a really good point. This is a really good game, and I just wouldn't have thought through that strategy. The engine points to something really interesting here, which is on black's response, white actually has a great tactic available. If you just look at it at the superficial level, okay, well, this is worsening my pawn structure, then you don't really think it through. But if you go through, okay, well, this does weaken my pawn structure, but how is black actually going to try to exploit it? He's going to try to exploit it with g5, and then I think, okay, well, then I have on this tactical attempt to exploit it, what's my best response? It's d4. I think that's right. So yeah, I think that's basically right. That's why I am so reluctant to move the pawns in front of my king. But here you actually can look at what the best tactical response to exploit for black is, and with that played, you get this double attack out, and this double attack refutes that pawn. So it's just a less superficial way of thinking. I wouldn't necessarily think this through, but it's really good and illustrative of a key point. So thinking through what the best tactical response for your opponent is, versus d4. This is interesting for white. So, anyways, really interesting situation. Overall, very cool stuff. Thank you very much for sending it, TK. This gives me something to think about, as opposed to just going on kind of the lazy rejection of h4. This refutation of black's tactical attempt to exploit h4 definitely gives something to think about. Anyways, interesting concept. I learned something from this game. So overall, yeah, thank you very much for sending it, TK. Appreciate it. Interesting ideas here. Also, the Alapin is a bad opening. I think that objectively true. But I'm probably not uh, making too much. I think we're all sort of on the same page that that's not objectively the best. Um, okay, on to the next one. Let's take a look. Okay, this is a game that Aphelion played on World Chess. Yeah, interesting. Um, so this is a game that Aphelion played on World Chess Live, or no, not World Chess Live. This is the FIDE Arena. So this is Aphelion playing Thomas Roja. I played him. I played Thomas Roja a bunch of times as well. I played him in order to. I've actually known Thomas Roja for a long time. Thomas Roja used to be in the military, and he's from New Mexico, I think. I used to play him on US Chess Live, World Chess Live a long time ago. But I played him a bunch of times on the FIDE Arena. So if you want a sense of who's on the FIDE Arena. Thomas Roja is on the FIDE Arena. He is. I played him a bunch of times trying to get that FIDE AGM title, and yeah. FIDE Arena. Okay, so FIDE has decided to expand the amount of titles that they give. FIDE has historically had 4 titles. And then yes, so it does cost about $75 USD. But for the cost of 75 USD, hey, what can I say? Look, you have a FIDE title and I have a FIDE title. So, who's really the loser in this situation? If you want a FIDE title, many people work their entire lives for a FIDE title. That is something that people do. The number of people who do that is not 0. But if you would like a FIDE title as soon as possible, what you can do is you can look at the arena titles. And for the price of about $75 USD, you can get yourself a FIDE title. You can request that your tournament director in the next FIDE tournament puts that next to your, puts that next to your name, next to all the other FIDE wall chart games. But yeah. If you're interested in getting a FIDE title as soon as possible, FIDE has expanded the number of titles that they give from 4 or 8 to 12. So yeah, this is well, I don't know anything about that, but in any case, if you're interested in getting yourself a FIDE title. FIDE titles are available on here. Yeah, so I got an AGM title this week. If anyone's interested, I posted the link to my AGM title on this, basically on this thing. But yeah, AGM title. Get your FIDE title as early as, probably a day or 2. The ACM title, if you can maintain 150 bullet games with a performance rating of over 1100, you can get a FIDE title. In any tournament you play, you can request your tournament director put the FIDE title next to your name, next to all the players with OTB titles. But yeah, strongly recommend this. I will put the link to the FIDE titles on here, and say this is the titles that you can get. There used to be 4 or 8. And then now there are 12. So there are 12 FIDE titles. Get yourself a FIDE title, and they cost about $75 USD. I got my AGM this week. I'm still excited about it, but it's up to you. If you're interested, FIDE titles are well within your reach. I would strongly recommend that people get on that topic. So this game, this was Thomas Roja against Aphelion. Aphelion's playing black, and let's take a look. This is a win for Aphelion. Aphelion is working his way towards a FIDE title himself. And knight to g5, bishop to c5, and he's trying to play the Traxler, but white declines. Thomas Roja, I don't know. All I know about him is he's in the U.S. military. And he used to play on World Chess Live, if I remember correctly, or US Chess Live. But now he plays on FIDE Online Arena, so that's interesting. Castles, d3, d5, knight takes, d5, knight takes, queen to h5, and here this is a play where basically black's up. This is a little bit aggressive. Let's think about this. Um, uh, yeah, after bishop c5, accepting the Traxler counter gambit, bishop takes f7 is better. Castles, d3, d5, and knight takes. Basically, this is this is slightly better for black. White just can't advance this effectively. The best move here for black is bishop to f5, yeah. So this is interesting. Bishop to f5 is better than h6. With h6, it looks like the refutation is knight to c3. That's kind of interesting. Knight to c3, and basically this threat on f7 becomes bishop f7, king e7, bishop to b3, and white is winning. So yeah, against bishop to c5. Yeah. I mean, yes, that's correct. Sam Siswani is saying bishop f7, king e7, bishop to b3 for white, and white is winning. Yeah, so there's going to be some tactical plays here. I think that bishop takes h6, knight to f6, queen takes, and yeah, this tactic plays out great for black. So, anyways, black is better. Black's up by about 8 pawns. Looks like a win for black. So let's think of improvements for black in this game. This is the Traxler. The Traxler was successfully played. White plays the inferior castles moves. Bishop takes f7. This pawn is hanging on f7. Better for white to take it and disrupt this king's development. There's still some fundamentals at play here. Bishop takes f7, king e7. How could that take of a pawn with check and a move to king to e7? How could that possibly be bad for white? So this is a better response to the Traxler for white. But that's not what happened in this game. White castles conservatively and is in a situation where black is a little bit better now. No real threats for black. Now this is basically just white with kind of an awkward knight attack, and black with good development. So overall, this should lead to a slightly better position for black, and now black kind of has to just play chess in an Italian type structure where white has an over advanced knight. I would be tempted to play h6 here. I think h6 is probably the best. I didn't know if he's a titled player. Is he an ACM? He probably is an ACM. Yeah, he must be. He's probably an ACM. I don't know where to look that up. But yeah, let's see. Thomas Roja ACM. Thomas Roja FIDE Arena. Interesting. But yeah, he probably is, right? Because he's like 1300 or so, and he was playing all the time. So, yeah, he probably is a FIDE titled player. I'm just trying to figure out where. So Thomas Roja is here, right? And let's see. I was just hoping to find his. Do you know for a fact that he's titled? He probably is. I can't see any reason why he wouldn't be. Interesting. Where does it say that? I'm still learning about that. Oh yeah, there you go. All right, ACM. There you are. Cool. Yeah, thank you for picking that up, Drumstick. This is a He is a titled player. Thomas Roja has a FIDE title, and you do not. I guess is the conclusion of that. I don't know if you have a FIDE title or not, but yeah, he has a FIDE title, ACM, and we know that. So that is interesting. That is so yeah. If you want a FIDE title, he has one. Aphelion's win against a FIDE titled player here. This H6 no, I don't think that's true. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I would give it, it's up to you, but if you want a FIDE title, yeah, well, $75. It would be better if it was free. But I don't know. So yeah, so basically, Aphelion beats a FIDE titled player in this game, and this D5 I think may objectively be the best. So I'm not gonna say anything about it. But H6 I would be tempted to play. With H6, Black has to choose between two pretty bad choices. Either knight to F3, retreating the knight, and kind of eliminating all of the the potential advancements. But basically, knight F3, D6, and Black can play like bishop to G4, and ACM norms. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, D6 and this should end up being better for Black. But yeah, D6 and Black is fine. So anyways, I would play H6 and just go for a kind of a straightforward Italian game here as Black, but it's up to you. Well, it wasn't that quiet. It was the Traxler. Um, all right, so now it all neutralizes and Black is better. But yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, in terms of improvements for Aphelion here, I think that so you played the Traxler, your opponent declined the gambit. D5, I think that on D5 maybe I was wondering if knight to D or knight to A5 made sense. But knight takes D4, fine. You deal with this pretty well. I think the improvements for Black here, bishop to F5 over H6. The issue with H6 is it just becomes a liability after. Hey, welcome. Thanks very much for joining the stream, Rock. Thanks for being here. So yeah, bishop to E7 I think is better for Black. You basically need pieces to be a defensive resource here. Bishop to E7 and White is good. So anyways, or Black is good in that case. So once the gambit is declined, what should you immediately do as Black? Castling is best. D5 is best, and here bishop to G4. Bishop to G4 actually makes a lot of sense. So in the Traxler where there's kind of memorizable moves, bishop to G4 is actually a strong one. The reason why bishop to G4 is strong, it gives it basically disrupts any attack from the queen going forward. So I would put this on the list of things that are potentially useful to Black in the Traxler, like in the declined Traxler. Bishop to G4 makes it so that this queen can never come to queen to H5. Also, F3, which would be the natural defensive move, can't be played because of this bishop pinning on G1. So if you play bishop to G4, you get this free tempo, and the queen basically is removed from a very natural attack. This heads off pretty much all of your all of your problems here. So bishop to G4 is the correct play. Bishop to G4, threatening queen to D1, and Black is fine. So this was the improvement. Bishop to G4, and Black is controlling this queen to D, basically pushing on this queen to D1. So that was it. Uh, Bishop to G4 was the move. You head off the entire basically white attack with bishop to G4, and you can play it with tempo. So I think that in terms of looking at this game, this is the improvement. Bishop to G4, better than knight takes D5. Then you can play knight takes D5. I mean, the queen goes somewhere here, probably queen to D2. Then you play knight takes D5. But the point is the queen doesn't have the same ability to attack on the dark squares as it did on the light squares. So it's a big difference in terms of the overall position. So yeah, that was the move. So Aphelion, walk away from this game hopefully with a little bit more of a basically with guidance to take a look at bishop to G4 in this kind of position where the bishop is pinning the F pawn. So this all trades. And black wins. So I think honestly in this game there's some tactics that we could go individually through all of these tactics and sort of determine which ones were thematically or which ones basically were more and less dangerous. H6 was not optimal. Neither was bishop to B6. Bishop so in terms of H6, bishop to F5 was better to defend the H7 pawn. In terms of bishop to B6, bishop to E7 was better to put the bishop on that diagonal. But what I'm saying is this played out well, ended up playing out well for black. But I don't think it's super useful to look at this theory because the improvement here should not be in this theory. The improvement here should be in playing bishop to G4. With bishop to G4, you've neutralized all of white's attacks. So this is the improvement in this game. I wouldn't sweat it. I wouldn't sweat, the specifics on the tactics, because ideally, if you were to encounter this position again, you would value the, value the bishop to G4. That was the important part. That was the part to think about, and yeah, and I guess that's what I would say in terms of improving the situation for black. So sidestep things that don't involve bishop to G4. With bishop to G4, you're putting pressure on the queen, and you're not allowing the queen into any of its natural attacking squares. That's important. So yeah, that's that's the point that I'm making, Aphelion. I think that this is an improvement in your Traxler game. So yeah, thank you very much for sending the game. Keep bishop to G4 in mind as something that can potentially head off threats from this queen, assuming that this bishop is pinning on the F pawn. So yeah, interesting game. A win over a FIDE titled player, always good. Yeah, good work. Keep up the good work, Aphelion. The last time we talked, I think you were looking towards a FIDE title for getting a FIDE title for yourself. I think that you are well within range. I think you can get the ACM. You just beat an ACM, so if you can beat this ACM consistently, you will get the same title, the FIDE title that this guy will get. And for anyone else who's interested in getting a FIDE title, previously you couldn't get a FIDE title up until a relatively advanced place in your chess development. But now you can get a FIDE title on FIDE Arena as soon as you'd like. So yeah, strongly recommend that. I got mine this week. I feel about the same, but now I have a FIDE title. So yeah, always an idea. Anyways, thanks all for sending the games. The next stream is at that's what I'm saying. Yeah, good question, Drumstuck. My understanding is not at this point, but that seems like an inefficiency on, or that seems like something that you would have to ask chess.com. So yeah, definitely ask chess.com about that particular topic. I have no opinion, but it could be an interesting way to introduce more titled players to Title Tuesday. If the goal is to have titled players in Titled Tuesday, then by all means get in. I know chess.com has some people with the M title. So if they have people with the M title, I can't imagine that they would not let people in with the AGM title. But yeah, good question. Not sure about Title Tuesday, but first thing you have to do, I guess, is get your FIDE title, and then that will become a question. I do play Title Tuesday sometimes. Yeah, Title Tuesday sometimes I do play that. I don't know. It's pretty strong. If I can do 500 in Title Tuesday, that's usually pretty good. But yeah, I do play it sometimes. If I have the right schedule, I play it. Cool. That's cool, Matt. Yep. Yeah. So anyways, just something to think about that. Those, if you want a FIDE title, you can get a FIDE title now. If you can play on the FIDE Arena site, and yeah, overall good stuff. Thanks to everyone for sending the games. Thanks all for participating in the stream. I hope that was helpful. I hope those tricks to find GM level games. I hope that's helpful. And yeah, overall, thanks all for being here. Next stream is at 9:35 p.m. Eastern tonight. Hope to see you there. And yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much for the for all for being here. Have a good day, everyone. And I will see you later. Thanks. Bye.